Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants Hangout. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I will be your host for today. I'm very excited for today's virtual field trip. Today we are joining Anna Adamek. She's the Curator of Natural Resources and Industrial Design at Ingenium, Canada's Museums of Science and Innovation. She's a historian of technology and has spent over 25 years working in museums and the public history environment. Recently, she curated an exhibit called From Earth to Us, which deals with the transformation of natural resources into products that we need and want in our everyday life. And today she's joining us from one of the museum's warehouses. So you may not know this, but only 4% of the collection is actually exhibited in the museum. So there's lots of really cool items that are kept behind the scenes and well preserved. And we're going to get a chance to dive into some of those artifacts today. So Anna, it's so great to have you joining us today and giving us this little behind the scenes tour of some things that many people may not get to see.
Hello, everyone. Hi from Ottawa, Ontario. We are at Ingenium, Canada's Museums of Science. I am Anna, one of the curators at Ingenium, and I have with me behind the camera Jeremy and Steven, who are our videographers, and we could not do this tour without them. So we would like to invite you all today to the National Collection. We are not in the museum. We are behind the scene in one of... So you will be able to see what we collect, how we store artifacts, how we process artifacts, and I will tell you some stories of objects that we can... We start this tour in the cataloging area of the museum. And right next to me, you can see one of our catalogers. He's very focused. At this museum, we collect all kinds of technologies. We collect slides that he has to process, but you will also see some really large artifacts. Cataloging area, we process artifacts. We actually also can get really up close with objects. When we go to the warehouse, you will see that some of the artifacts in the collection are not really accessible. They are stored really high on shelves. So we need this facility to examine objects, to catalog them, to make sure that artifact numbers are on the... Now, Brian is working on this sheet model. Let's go to the collection. This collection is one of 3 artifact warehouses. We literally have hundreds of thousands of objects. When you go to the museum, you can see maybe right now 4% of the collection on the floor. Other artifacts are preserved, kept safe, studied in collection warehouses. Several areas where we culture and aviation to space and vacuum tubes, but we also have special facilities. And I want to show you one of very special rooms where we keep artifacts that are especially fragile. Door to this vault. As you noticed when we came in, this room was dark. We actually want to make sure that the objects that are stored in this special facility are protected from light of damage. So even in the main warehouse, our lights are on a timer. They will go down, and we make sure that the artifacts are safe and right. Also in this room, we have, because here we have objects that are especially fragile, we control the temperature of this environment. So these objects are in a very constant environment. You can see we have lots of wooden objects here. We have lots of glass, objects that are especially old, some scientific instruments. We have a wonderful collection of cameras. I will show you one of the early cameras. This one is from early 1900s, different than the cameras that you now have on your phone. And on the shelves here, you see all kinds of time, from late 1800s, 1890s, to the newest cameras that we produce today. In our warehouses, in the technological artifacts, we have some old technologies, but we also acquire new technologies. We also have some new technologies you can find in the warehouse. In our talking about that we have to preserve in special environment. Sometimes objects do not look fragile. This is an old stove that was made in 1800s, probably around 1860s. It looks robust, but actually when we researched, it traveled to Canada. It was made in Canada, so it was important for us to acquire and add to the collection this really rare stove. But because it has this really fragile mica windows here, it has some little knobs. When it arrived in our warehouses, it was really damaged. We have catalogers that you have met already, but we also have are people who are especially trained to deal with old technologies, who are able to restore and make sure that these technologies are properly. Amazing job on this stove, and let's move forward. So as I mentioned, some of the artifacts here are not that accessible. You can see they are high on shelves. But here we have few examples that, let's see what this is. Looks like a big pot, big rusted pot. Well, actually, this pot was used to make fertilizer. Right now, we would go to a store, we would go to Home Depot and buy a fertilizer, apply it to grow our plants. In 1800s, people had to make their own fertilizer. So they would use a pot like this, a really large pot, to boil wood ashes and produce potash. Each artifact that we have tells a story. That's the whole idea behind the National Collection. Each artifact will tell you something new about the past, about people who in the past acquired, made, used. So this, again, what could it be? It's a very strange object. Actually, it's identified as a washing machine. This was used to wash 1904. It is a plunger. Used in a big tap, it would be moved up and down, water would be coming through here, soapy water would be coming through here, and your clothes would get clean, or sort of clean. As you can see, it probably wasn't used that often. It's in really good condition. You think about this object being in the water all the time, it would be rusted. Probably wasn't used that often. We have another interesting object here. Like some of the irons we have, it's very small. But what is really interesting about this iron, it's the plaque. It doesn't look anything like the plaques we use today. So how was this little iron used? You had to unscrew a light bulb. So you would first unscrew a light bulb. You would then screw in your iron there to get your electricity and use the iron to iron your clothes. Why is it so small? A woman in the household usually would have several irons of different sizes. So maybe this one was used fine, larger iron for other type of work. Now you can also see there is a caution note on this iron. In a national collection of technological artifacts, we often have to deal with hazardous materials. It could be broken glass, it could be asbestos, as in this case. Asbestos most likely is in this wire. It is a substance that may cause cancer, so we have to be very careful when we deal with technological artifacts. I know in this case that the data to my health, but when we acquire new artifacts, we always have to assess them to make sure that they are safe. Another, electric lights, electric lamps. On, you get your light at your fingertip. This early lamp looks a lot like candles. Why is that? Why would we design a lamp, electric lamp, to look like a candle? When electric lamps were first introduced, people were not sure if they wanted to use them in their houses. They were not very comfortable with that new technology. So the designers, the manufacturers to sell electric lights, technology with which people were very familiar, a candle. Can tell us a broad story in the past. Let's move along and see what else we find. As I mentioned, is the most diverse. We have all kinds of collections here. Another rail access, that warehouse is mostly the would have locomotives, streetcars, warehouse. And we have yet another one which has lots of agricultural implements, carriages. Yeah, I show you when we were in the cataloging area, you saw a little model of a boat. We collection, not only models, but boats. But think of the size. Sometimes we are not able to acquire technologies. Sometimes we have to acquire models. So although we have some boats in the collection, we usually have the smaller ones. And for large ships, we acquire models. Well, we are coming close to another interesting artifact. The collection. Again, we can look at it. What is it? It's a strange looking artifact. Actually, it's a hearse. Hearse was a vehicle used for funerals. So this particular hearse was used in Quebec for funeral processions. It is a sad artifact. As you can see, the hearse is small, children. Sometimes another ship model, again, very different than the ship model that you have seen in cataloging, or the boat that you have seen along the way as we were coming to this space. This ship model was made at the National Research Council in Canada, and it was made especially to test icebreakers. So the National Research Council had a large tank in which they could freeze water, they could actually make the same condition as in the north, and they would use this model to see how we can break the ice, how we can use the ships, what kind of shipping routes we could develop, what kind of technologies we need, and how we can improve them. Very different story than the ones that you have heard already. A fire truck. This one was made. Was lots of forestry industries.
All right, boys and girls. So I think they might have gone to a section of the warehouse where the signal might not be too great because we just lost them for a moment. So if you can still hear us, Anna and team, I think you just went to a section of the
during
warehouse.
that fire, to fight that fire. It was pulled by horses or by men. It was not, it wasn't yet a car that you see today or trucks that you see today. Let's move along. This object, probably some of you will recognize it.
All right, so Anna and team, I don't know if you guys can hear me, but I think you're in a section of the warehouse with a weak signal. Okay, and it looks like we just lost them. So we're gonna give them a minute to come back. It looks like it's a really big warehouse. And when they moved into that back section of the warehouse, we lost them. So I think maybe it's just too far away from a wall and they can't get a good signal. So let's give them a moment.
The medical technology. The first ultrasound technology was actually developed to find the wreckage of the Titanic. A glimpse into the collection with, and maybe this is a
All right, Anna, can you hear me?
Hey, I'm ready for your question.
All right, Anna, if you can hear me, do you think you could move
Yes,
to another section? Great. Can you move to another section of the warehouse? The spot you're in right now, the signal's having trouble reaching us.
Okay, we will go back to the main alley.
We need more signal. So if you want to go back the Wi-Fi.
Yes, we will go back to the main alley and hopefully we'll get more signal there.
Yeah, that would be perfect. We lost you right at the end.
Oh, that's it. So you didn't hear my story of the Titanic?
No, we missed it.
I was showing the model of the Titanic, and I was talking about different technologies that we developed and of the tragedy that happened around the Titanic. So, for example, ultrasound, which is a medical technology, was actually first developed to find the wreckage of Titanic. And then the telegraph, which was a communication technology, really took off after the sinking of the Titanic.
Okay. All right.
Is this place better?
Yeah, you see the sound seems to be coming through nice and clear now.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking us on that little tour. I can only imagine the thousands and thousands of artifacts you have. It must be a pretty incredible place to visit and to see so much history in one spot.
I'm glad I could show you at least a little glimpse.
All right. Well, let's get to it. Let's meet some of our classrooms. So let's see. Let's get started. We'll go to Kalispell, Montana first. We have a 3rd grade classroom joining us. Let me turn their microphone on. How we doing, Montana?
Good.
All right. Does anybody have a question?
Montana.
What's your favorite? What's your favorite artifact?
Did you catch that, Anna? He's wondering what your favorite artifact is in the warehouse.
It's like asking a mother which child is her favorite. We have many wonderful artifacts. One of my favorite is called industrial transfer, or a decal. So think about stickers. We now have stickers that we put on all on our books or notebooks. But we actually have in the collection large stickers that were used to decorate trains and streetcars. And some of these decals are and silver. They are quite beautiful. So I would have to say these are some of my favorite technologies, artifacts.
All right. Excellent. Thank you for that question. We're going to go to Coburg, Ontario this time with Mrs. Langer's grade 3-4 class. Let me turn their microphone on. How are we doing, 3-4s?
Okay, ask your question. Say, hello, my name is Harrison.
Hello, my name is Harrison. What's the oldest thing in your museum?
The oldest artifact that we have is 11. It was used for construction. It was used to build old churches, large buildings, and it was actually used in Southern Europe. It came to Canada in 1970s, and it has been in our collection since then.
Sorry, Anna, what is that item? We lost you right at the part where you told us what it was.
So this artifact is it's a little piece of technology that was used for construction of different buildings, churches, large palaces, to make sure that that all the lines in the buildings were straight. So I can only describe it to you.
Okay, so
and it dates to 12th century, 1100s.
The 1100s. Wow, that's amazing. All right, let us go. Let's see. Let's go to Calgary this time. Calgary, Alberta. We've got a grade 5 classroom joining us. Let me turn their microphone on. There we go. How are we doing, grade 5s?
Okay, question.
So my name is Connor, and I'm just wondering, where in the world did you get the artifacts? Because it's not like you can just like, oh, we want this artifact. Hey, let's do a thing to get the artifact. Just magically appear here. Like, how do you get it? Do you actually have to go somewhere to get it, or do you know?
That's an excellent question. That's a really good question. Sometimes people call us and they say, I have this great item, would you like it? And then we see it, we ask, want to times. And I will go, for example, to an old mine. I go down an old mine. Sometimes I have water pouring on my head as I do that, and I search for objects, and I assess which technologies are important enough to bring back to our collections. So this process may start with someone else offering an object to the collection, or with a curator saying, this is a really important object, we need to find it. And then we search across Canada until we find and bring the object to the collection.
All right, that was a
treasure hunt.
Okay, cool. That was a great question. Let's see. Let's go to Woodstock, Ontario. Mr. McLeod's group, their grade 8 students are joining us. And I know you guys were having a little problem with the sound. Hopefully you can hear us now. And just because you joined last, I need you to turn the microphone on for me because I can't reach it on the screen.
Hey, Tommy.
Okay, so we miss quite a bit of the presentation because it's a little glitchy. However, what is the most Canadian artifact you have?
In your opinion.
In your opinion.
It's a very difficult question. We have everything that we collect is in some way linked to Canada. So either the object was made in Canada or was used in Canada or had significance to Canadian history. I would say probably one of the most Canadian objects is Canadian flag. We have different samples of fabric and colors that were used to come up with the flag that we use today. So we needed to test which color is the right red that we will use, which fabric will actually last. So I would say that's probably the most Canadian collection.
All right, very cool. Let us go. Let's see. Mrs. Belinsky's group, grade 6s in Markham, Ontario. Let me turn your microphone on. There we go. How are we doing, grade 6s?
What's the most ruined object that you have?
Oh, most ruined object. Usually when we get objects that are damaged, they department, and we make sure that we put them together. Objects that are in a really poor condition. That stove that I showed you, you wouldn't believe it. It came to us in pieces. Glass was broken, parts were broken, even the metal parts were broken. But we were able to put it together and it looks almost new. So that one was probably one of the it's interesting to see the damage on the objects. Sometimes it tells, look at an object and I see that there is lots of stains on a handle. I know that someone was using this object a lot and the oil from the hands stayed on the handle. So it actually gives me clues to the object, the condition of the
All right. So we're doing pretty well with the signal. We just lose you. It kind of freezes a little bit on the sound sometimes, Anna. So I don't know if you can move a little closer to
try to move closer to the cataloging area, and that may improve the signal.
Sure.
Unfortunately, we are in the warehouse.
Yeah, no worries. It's coming
toward the cataloging.
It's coming through pretty well. We just sometimes we lose a word or two when you're talking. So
yes, and that's too bad.
So far, so good. Mrs. Reeves' class is joining us. Their grade 4 is in Leamington, Ontario. So let's turn their microphone on. How are we doing, Leamington?
Good.
Hello.
Hi. Hi. Hi.
Okay, Haley, go ahead.
Hi.
Why did you?
Go ahead, Haley.
Why did you choose to work at the Artifacts Museum?
I find the objects really interesting. I like history, but I especially like looking at objects that people used in. I can learn from these objects. Think about your textbook. We can read about an object, but when you have it in your hands, when you can see how heavy it is, what are the hazards used when you use this object, what you need to do to use it? Aspect of the job really fascinating. So that's why I chose a museum.
All right, excellent. And let's visit our final classroom. And they were kind enough to jump in to a canceled spot this morning with the weather. We've had some crazy weather in Southern Ontario the last few days. Mr. Sabatini's group, they're joining us from St. Catharines, our grade 8 classroom, and go ahead with the question.
Okay. What is the most valuable artifact that you have?
I think I lost you.
They were wondering about the most valuable artifact in the collection.
No, we're losing the signal, unfortunately.
How about now? Can you hear me, Anna?
Try again. Yes.
Okay. They're wondering about the most valuable artifact in the collection.
Oh, that's a really good question. So the value for that monetary value, it's not the price of an object. It's the history behind the object. So in that regard, some of the locomotives that we have, some of the trains that we have are really valuable because they tell us about the entire country, about people who use these trains to go from sea to sea. But in we have some jewelry that's really valuable. It's a jewelry years, and it was a state gift from Saudi Arabia. We do have new pieces of technology. So, for example, different scanners that were developed for mining. These are quite expensive. So it all depends how you look at artifacts. There is historical value. For some of those, there is also monetary value.
Okay. All right. Well, we visited all of our live classrooms once. So what I'll do is I'll open it up because we have time for some more questions. So if you do have another question in the classrooms, come and wave right at the camera and I'll know to come visit your group. So let's start in Montana. Your microphone's on.
Okay. Hello. So
Hello.
how do you? Hi. So how do you organize the workshop, the artifacts? How do you organize the artifacts?
The artifacts. Yes. Excellent question. We store artifacts as we have space. We don't store them by subject. We really try to find the space. The object has a number. Maybe if we can turn around, you can see one of the numbers. 871061. This number means that we bought the object in 1987 and that we already had before we bought this object. The number is always linked to our artifact database. So through the database, we can find the location of objects. So stored as we have space, but very strictly controlled through a database.
Okay, and then looks like Mrs. Reeves' class. I see someone with the microphone, so your microphone's on.
Okay, go ahead, Nathan.
How much artifacts do you have?
Could you repeat? I think we lost the question.
How much artifacts do you have?
Anna, he's wondering about a total number. Is there a total number of artifacts in the catalog? How many do you have?
It all depends how you count. If you just count the objects, we probably have 100,000. All the parts. We have, for example, a toy train set that has 100 parts. So there would be several 100,000 of objects in the collection if you look at all the parts.
All right, and then let's see. I see waving in Calgary. Let me turn your microphone on.
What artifact has the most interesting story, like in your opinion?
Every artifact has an interesting story. That's the whole point of acquiring these artifacts. So some tell us about lives of women, housewives in 1800s. Another will tell us story of inventors who work today to forward our knowledge, our scientific knowledge. So it's impossible to choose one, the most interesting.
All right, I see waving in Mrs. Belinsky's class, so I'll turn your microphone on.
Hi, I'm Sadie.
Hello.
Hi. My question is, what do you have to study in school to be able to work in the museum?
All kinds of jobs. My colleagues here are videographers. I am a historian of technology. You have seen catalogers, they study. Teachers. You just have to be interested in history and you have to be interested in objects. That's key.
All right, and just as an example, what did you study in university? You studied history?
Technology.
Okay, very cool. Let's see, Mrs. Langer's class, microphone's on.
Hello, my name is Sasha and I have a question. How many artifacts are made from the 18th century?
Majority of our collection is from 19th century, but I would say probably about 10% of the collection is from 18th century, so 1700s. And some of those are different stoves that people used to heat their homes, different domestic technologies, pots and pans. We have beauty technologies, so curlers for the hair, hair dryers. We have lots of irons that go back to 1700s. So I would say probably good 10% of the collection.
Thank you.
All right, and I'm just going to check in with Mr. Sabatini's class just because their camera's not on today. Do you guys have another question?
Yeah, we have one more. Just 1 second. A student's making his way to the microphone.
For sure.
Okay.
What's the most recent artifact you have?
Most recent artifact in the collection is from 217. So it was just made last year, and it is a scanner. I mentioned the scanner for mines. So it is a scanner that can travel through a mine and make a 3D scan of this mine. So then the 3D scan is used to produce a virtual mine. So that is one of the very latest that we have in the collection. It's a really cool piece of technology.
Okay, that sounds really cool. And then I guess the idea is that, say, students in a classroom or something could use augmented reality and actually feel like they're in the mine.
Yes.
Very
exactly.
cool.
They could walk through a virtual mine. That's the point. But it also keeps miners safe. So we can scan the areas that maybe have not been used recently and may not be too safe. We can see the falling rock, etc.
All right. And then our final classroom, if you guys don't mind turning your mic on for me, Mr. McLeod's group, he's just off my screen, so I need you to turn it on for me.
Yeah. How many artifacts do you get a year?
It all depends. We get lots of offers. And all the offers I got that year, 100 phone calls. And these were just phone calls from people who wanted to donate an object rather than me looking for a specific object. Out of that, I collected maybe 3 or 4 objects. So between all the curators, there are 6 of us at this institution, 20-30 objects every year. And objects we have, and we may deaccession some. If we get a better example or more important, deaccession or get rid of.
Okay, so Anna, just to confirm, because the sound cut just a little bit on us, out of 6 curators, you would say that each one kind of brings in 20 to 30 items a year?
I would say all of us together bring about 20 to 30 items a year. We have to, each item, we have to present to an acquisition committee out there and say, this is what I want, and bring it in. I actually have to make a case for an object. I have to defend it to the acquisition committee. We vote on an acquisition and on adding the object to the national collection.
All right. So we have time to visit maybe 1 or 2 more classrooms. So let's jump. I can see in Leamington, someone's there with a question. So go ahead. Oh, let me try your microphone again. There we go. Try now.
What is your oldest artifact?
So the oldest artifacts, we were talking about that a bit a few minutes ago, but maybe I got cut off, is from 12th century, so 1100s. And it is a piece of technology, small piece of technology that was used to make sure that a building would be constructed straight, that everything would align properly. And it was in empire. So in Southern Europe and in Asia, to construct churches, palaces, very large buildings. 12th century, 1100s.
Okay, Joe, try. Does he hear you? Yeah, our mic is on.
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Joe? Ask Joe.
What is the weirdest thing that you have in the warehouse?
Oh, the weirdest thing. Some are really strange. I would say a weirdest thing is a little box with a hand in it. And I have no idea why it was developed. It was developed by the National Research Council and early.
Sorry, Anna, we lost just the tail end of it. You said a little hand in a box.
So objects that we have is, it sounds really developed by the National Research. Think that it is actually early. It's a robotic hand in a box.
Okay, a robotic hand in a box. Gotcha. Okay, and maybe let's see. There's lots of hands, but we're close to our end time, so maybe we'll visit Montana one more time. Let's see. And your microphone's on.
How long have you been collecting artifacts for?
The museum.
How long has the museum been collecting artifacts?
So museum has 7, but the national collection actually goes back to 1850. For this National Museum of Science, there was already an existing national. All the national museums collection, so 1850s, the first artifact.
All right. Well, Anna, thank you so much for hanging out with us today, and thank you so much to your crew who followed around and were able to film and get the sound going for us. That was a lot of fun. We really enjoyed it. Obviously, I know things can be tricky in a warehouse, but I think we did a pretty good job. And I think the signal held out well, and we got to see some really cool things today. So I really appreciate you taking the time to hang out with our classrooms today.
Thank you so much for being here with us. We are glad we could show you some of our collections.
All right, and boys and girls, as always, you guys were amazing. Thank you so much for the excellent questions. Great to have such a cool group of classrooms from Canada and the United States. And so what I'll do now is I'll turn the microphones on, and I'll give you guys a chance to say goodbye and thank you. And we'll sign off for today. So here we go, microphones coming on.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
All right, they love that part, that's for sure. Anna, again, thank you to you. Thank you to your team. And we look forward to hopefully doing this again sometime.
I hope so. Bye.
All right, thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
You too.